I recently bought this PC and was running it recently when it started to overheat. Temps reaching around 100 degrees Celsius. I have a water cooler inside of the system, which I am pretty sure works correctly, but I'm not sure how to check 100% as I've seen you take apart somewhat similar ones before. Anyways, I decided to take it upon my newbie self, I've rarely worked on PCs, to reapply thermal paste and maybe see what could be going wrong. One thing led to another, and I made the mistake of also putting the CPU in the wrong way, and it bent the corner. I attempted to bend it back correctly, and when everything was put back together, no boot up. Also now the cooler light will blink and turn off, so it may also be something wrong there. I don't have a picture of the bent CPU chip, but I attached a picture of what it looks like when it was bent. Ouch. Can you say ouch, Bogus?
Ouch.
That's a big ouch. This is that viewer's broken gaming PC, and well, supposedly that bent CPU is still in the rig. Hey there, and welcome to Fix or Flop. Just know that everything you see us do here is done free of charge, including replacing hardware. We don't charge, obviously, for the labor or anything like that, and we make money on the back end by uploading videos like these to YouTube and other sites. We, with respect to replacing parts, do have on hand a purchased secondhand CPU to replace the one that's already in here. I think there's like a 9400 or 9600K, something like that, Core i5 in here. And since he knew that he already bent the chip and it didn't post when he put it back in the socket, which does make me cringe a little bit, he took it upon himself to go ahead and buy a replacement on eBay since they don't make these new anymore. So we do have that on hand and we're gonna replace that for him. We'll check to make sure that that chip he bought secondhand already works before we throw it in here, by the way, because it's possible there might be issues with the socket or just the motherboard in general since he put the broken one back in. I'm not even sure how he managed to do that if the substrate was bent. Apparently he bent it back, and there's just a whole lot of cringe in this story. So with that context, hopefully you'll stick around, and hopefully we can get this rig back up and running again in no time. Are you ready? Stay with me. Are you sick and tired of screwing with the same basic tool we've been using for decades? Looking for something that won't result in a cramped hand or time wasted? Then check out the LTT screwdriver. It's literally just called screwdriver, but don't let the name fool you. It's not ratchet, but it has a built-in one based on MegaPro's long-standing and reliable design for extra durability and ease of use. Nothing drives me crazier than spending half an hour tightening down case fans. But the LTT screwdriver packs loads of torque in its beefy handle. Also in its beefy handle, 12 different bits for various applications. Oh, and have you seen my shaft? And look, if anything goes wrong, floating around somewhere in the ether is the Trust Me Bro limited lifetime warranty. So be sure to check these out via the links below. Now, unlike what you might expect from a fix or flop video, I am not going to attempt to power the system on to get a baseline reading before we swap things around. Personally, I would have even put the CPU back in here, but I definitely do not want to attempt to give it any sort of power for risk of damaging other components in the rig. I also expect there'll be a second component to this video in the cooler because the original message from the owner mentioned CPU overheating. In fact, that was what started this entire fiasco, him removing things, removing the chip, and then bending it somewhat in the process. So this is probably clogged. If I had to wager, this being an iBuyPower AIO, I'd expect this to be prematurely clogged, similar to some of the other AIOs we've found in this playlist, and that will warrant, of course, a cooler replacement. So to start things off, this here is the replacement Core i5 9600K. So this one in theory should work even though it is used. The eBay listing said that it was used in good condition and tested prior to shipping. There's one problem though, I just realized this. I don't have any more Z370 or Z390 motherboards. I have slightly older boards and of course a lot of newer boards. But that's a problem because it means I can't independently verify that the replacement CPU works prior to going into his original motherboard. So here's what we're gonna do. This is gonna be kind of cringe, but in an effort to save time here, I'm just going to throw it straight into his original motherboard. If there's no damage to the socket, I think we'll be okay. But if we still don't get a post, what I will do is take it upon myself to completely overhaul the platform. I'll give him a new motherboard and I'll give him a new CPU. I don't want to hold on to this any longer than I have to. I'm already very grateful that this owner drove out to have it worked on.
Meanwhile.
Oh yeah, pre-built case tolerances. You gotta love it. I can't even get this freaking fan cable out from the cutout beside this motherboard tray because the power supply is too close to it. What is this? Let's see if we can very carefully remove this cooler. All right, and that should be our broken Core i5 in there. We're gonna be very careful with this. I'm gonna assume the worst and that there might be pieces of this chip falling apart. The socket actually looks pretty darn good. As for this CPU though, it actually looks okay so far. Ah, okay, yeah, so the camera might not pick this up well, but you can see there's a slight bend in the substrate there, and I imagine it was much worse than this before the viewer bent it back into shape, into where it is now. You can see there's even some creases on the pad side of this chip, so I am not shocked that this did not post. Like I said, however, the socket in this board looks to be in really good shape. I don't see any bent or missing pins, so I'm comfortable enough installing this replacement Core i5 straight up. I would normally, again, like to test independent of this rig that we're working on, but for the sake of time, we're just gonna toss it in there. And if this still doesn't work, I'm just gonna replace the platform outright because I didn't have to buy this. The viewer bought it himself, which I think was very responsible, was very preemptive of him, and I appreciate that. So let's go ahead and throw it in. I'm not gonna bother shoving a cooler on. We're just gonna leave the system on for a few seconds and try for a post. If we can get that, then I think we can go ahead and move on to the other elephant in the room, that being potentially a clogged AIO. All right, and let's give it some power. Now, like I said, we're not gonna keep this on for very long. Obviously, there's no cooler attached, and I do not recommend you do this if you aren't familiar with PC hardware. We're only gonna have it on for maybe 10 seconds at the most. Chips should not heat up that quickly. We're just looking for a sign of life here on the screen. Chip is getting quite hot. Gonna get a post. Come on. There we go. Okay, that's it. That's all I wanted to see. So we got our post. That's good to see. That was the iBuyPower logo. The chip was getting quite hot, so that's usually a good sign. Typically that means it's getting power. So the board looks to be okay. Now I'm ready to put a replacement cooler on this. I've already made up my mind. I'm gonna replace the cooler regardless because he was complaining about temps prior to this. I just want to rule it out as a potential problem because if you recall, the owner didn't get a chance to actually see if his temperatures were fixed by simply repasting. Typically thermal paste doesn't go bad in 2 or 3 years. I mean, it will become crusty and lose its robustness after a while, but you shouldn't be seeing 100-degree plus temperatures when you weren't seeing those temperatures 6 months prior and you weren't tinkering much in the BIOS, which doesn't sound like this owner was. So I'm gonna err on the side of caution and replace it outright just to be safe. Now, when I said peace of mind, I meant it. This is a tower cooler from Be Quiet, the Dark Rock 4, a 200-watt TDP unit. It's a very tried and true, reliable, good-looking tower cooler, and it's gonna keep his temps in check without a doubt. This is Old Faithful here. You don't have to worry about leaks, clogs, or anything like that because it's just an air cooler. And I think at this point, the viewer is probably ready to move on from clogged AIOs. The other issue we ran into is if we wanted to throw a 240 or 360 mil in this case, the front panel, which is really the only place we could put something larger, is very restrictive. There's really not much room at all for air to migrate into the case from up here, so I don't think putting radiators and fans up front is the best for CPU temperatures. You get this beautiful black ceramic finishing, 6 copper heat pipes, a nice nickel-plated copper cold plate, and pretty sweet aesthetics up front. So this is what you'll see from the side of your case. You get a handy screwdriver included. I know this is like just an extra, but I think it's really cool. And of course you can't go wrong with a 135mm PWM Silent Wings fan. You can learn more about the Dark Rock 4 by clicking the sponsor link below. I want to thank Be Quiet for being the continued product sponsor of this playlist. Now, one small downside with this cooler, if you don't have enough clearance in your case to move this fan upward, you're either gonna have to relocate it to the back or run a 2 DIMM setup instead of 4 because this first DIMM slot is completely covered by the fan. So what I did was take a look at his kits here. He's got basically 8 gig DIMMs a piece, and 4 of them, or 32 gigs in total, at 3000 megahertz. I have actually 2 16 gig DIMMs, of course they're Vengeance RGB Pro, so basically the same thing, just 2 sticks instead of 4, which does free up 2 additional slots for him, and this of course will work with the fan in the location that it's in. I'm of course going to give him back his 32 gig kit as well, so he can repurpose this in another rig. Basically he's getting 2 free 16 gig DIMMs, and I think it's gonna look a lot better with that fan on the right side of the tower versus the left. Also gonna do a bit of a fan shuffle here, and since we're repurposing his AIO fans, we're effectively gaining one in the process. Cable management's good and tidy now, at least given what we're working with. And things cleaned up nicely on this side as well. Really like the way the Dark Rock 4 looks in here, the fact that we've got 2 fans now at the front, even though the front is almost totally restricted. We do have an exhaust at the rear. Cable management looks pretty good. I think we're ready for a final power on. Whew. Here we go then. Power on at the rear, power on up front. Okay. Bit of a delay, no problem. Let's see how this goes. I'm pretty sure Windows is on here. It sounded like the rig was working just fine up until the temperature issue the owner ran into. And yeah, there we go. Looks like Windows 11. So we are A-okay with this rig. But before you click away, there is still one last thing I want to do, and that's check the old AIO. So we're gonna jump straight into the block side of this, where I expect we'll see most of the clogging, little microfins in here. Love to grab all of the small debris that tends to build up in these blocks prematurely. Just one more torque screw here, and then let's see if we can't pop this off. There we go. I'm excited. Oh, yeah, ooh. Wow, this I think is the worst yet. So we've got a ton of gunk in that central channel there. That is disgusting. It's a nice gooey green color, definitely hindering flow, and that will massively affect CPU temperatures. I drained most of the fluid out on the loop side of things, but I want to see what's under this little rubber cap, because this is where the microfin stack is. And yeah, again, this is just some of the worst I've seen. I wonder how long this has been happening. This poor owner has probably been dealing with super high CPU temps for so long and didn't even realize it. Didn't realize he was losing out on performance because his loop clogged prematurely. And on this side of the block, I mean, this is gross. Look at this crap. This is so thick. It's thicker than I've ever seen it before. Golly, and it has this awful, awful smell to it. Yeah, you're not getting fluid flowing through this. I'm so glad we preemptively swapped this out. I would never put this anywhere near a system. Even if I knew it was gonna do this in 2 years, that's still far too early for an AIO like this. It's such a shame that this has been happening more and more recently with some of these units. It's almost like Jell-O. That's the consistency of this stuff, which I've never seen before. I'm gonna have to deep clean this screwdriver. And there's absolutely no hope for this side of things either. It's so bad that not only is the central channel totally clogged, there's just this gooey slug of just nastiness here. Oh man, this is crusty. But it looks like some of it has made its way through the microfins and clogged here on the ends, which is just compounding the problem. I have no idea how the viewer managed to get his system running as long as he did with this much gunk built up. This is honestly just kind of infuriating, I'm not gonna lie. This should not be happening. And there are probably so many pre-built iBuy power rigs out there with 120 and 240 mil AIOs that are doing this exact same thing, and folks don't even realize it because they're just not computer savvy. Maybe they don't notice the performance loss, they don't notice the temperature spikes. Oh boy, this is a big deal. It's unfortunately impossible for little old me to make any noticeable impact with regards to this clogging. We've been discovering more and more of it on this channel, and I feel like I'm just like a magnet for this stuff now. If you've got super toasty temps and you're running an AIO, hit me up. I'll even cover shipping. If you don't live in Orlando or around Orlando, Florida, but you live maybe in the continental 48, I'm totally willing to pay shipping. At this point, it's getting out of hand, and if I'm seeing it as much as I am here locally, it's a big deal, and this needs to be escalated. Again, think about the number of folks with pre-built rigs that are going through the exact same thing this owner has with his iBuy Power AIO. Not just them, MSI, there have been others, Lee & Lee, Fractal had issues. It just seems like all of a sudden, so many AIO issues are popping up. And most of them have to do with clogging. Either there's some solder residue issue and that's creating gunk buildup, or the coolant itself isn't being treated properly. This is just, it's getting out of hand, folks, it really is. But at least we can say one less viewer has to deal with these issues. One at a time, I suppose. It's about all I can do as a single person here, but if you know folks who have AIOs like these, at the very least, just give them a shout, let them know that they should be checking temperatures. They can be preemptive even. Some of these companies have sent out PSAs, alerts to folks who have older units that are being affected like this, and they can get those taken care of before things get worse. The last thing you want is for your CPU to be running at 100 degrees Celsius at idle in the BIOS, and with an AIO that's only a year old. That's absurd. I don't know how old this one is, but it's certainly not old enough to be exhibiting the clogging symptoms we're seeing here. So yeah, I mean, most I can do is just replace it when I see it. I'm glad I did. We don't have to worry about this kind of thing with the Dark Rock 4 in his rig now. With that, if you guys enjoyed this one, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you have not already. If you want to support us and the work we do here on Patreon, you can do so via the Patreon link below. And if you just want to join our public Discord server, that's totally free of charge. You can do so. That link is a bit lower in the video description. Yeah, we just keep running into these, but that's the point. I mean, that's why I'm here. You know, whatever issue you have, if you live in or around Orlando, Florida, you want to reach out, you can do so via the Fix or Flop link that'll be somewhere near the top of the description. Okay, enough link plugging. That's all for this one. I will catch you in the next one. My name's Greg. Thanks for learning with me.